power that all of a sudden notions of race are delegitimized, but other people have the power and they're still clearly raced, but they don't think of themselves in those terms. I was at this conference and a British scholar, very well known, talking about black people, non-white peoples, and I hate that non-white concept, people of color. So in the response, question and answer period, I just say, well, white people are marked by color as well. When you talk about people of color, then you suggest that white is not a color and that white people are normal and normative and the rest of us are colored. People of color is just another version of colored people, but it sounds very hip. So basically what I think is that there are people with a political interest in saying that race doesn't matter. But these are the same people that enjoy the privilege of race. So, so we just have to call them out and say, that's a political theory that you're using to stop other people from now consolidating around race by saying, oh, that is just essentialist, race and nation and these things, they don't matter. But where are the powerful people and in what nations do they reside? And so it's just a racket. You have to be able to see through it. Yeah. So when poor Marjorie's invited me to give this lecture, I said, well, if Marjorie knows what she's getting herself into, she's very brave. But I believe in challenging some of these uncomfortable kinds of truths and just asking us to look at it differently. So don't let the postmodernist theory confuse you. You have to be able to say, yes, I know why you guys are saying that, but let's look at another way. Because if all the oppressed peoples of the world were really to come together and say this is foolishness, you know what would happen? Big revolution. Nobody wants that, really.
I appreciate very much what you had to say tonight.
Thank you.
The whole question then is really one of economics. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that the people in Africa who sold us to the Europeans or to the Arabs, and we often forget that the slave trade went the other way too, towards the East. Yes, you did. One of the interesting things is that Kwame Nkrumah said that the two questions that the Africans who sold the people never asked the Europeans or the Arabs who bought them were, one, what are you going to do
with them?
With the people? And the second one, which would have frightened the Europeans, was, can I join you in what you're doing? In other words, the economics of slavery has often been allowed to, in effect, divert us away from our own realities. That's one. But Harold Cruz, in his The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, right, pointed out, speaking of Claude McKay, that there was a paradoxical contradiction in the fact that the African American, to use that expression, as opposed to the person of Caribbean origin, that in the Caribbean, McKay and I think Zora O'Neill, they were all of Caribbean origin, and above all Marcus Garvey, that none of these people did their defining of themselves where they came from. And it took the liberating, paradoxically, force of America, the United States that is, to allow them the freedom of expression as opposed to the colonial and, of course, subtly racist places in the Caribbean from which they came. Just your thoughts on that.
Yes, no, it raised some very interesting questions. Now, on the business of the Africans who sold Africans into slavery, we shouldn't really get too distraught about that. But just look at the way our contemporary politicians are behaving, and you'll understand how, the elite will say, it's about elitism, it's just people who have power, they exploit power, so, we tend to think of Africa as sort of homogeneous, and we don't recognize there are class distinctions and social distinctions there. And that even though there was indigenous slavery, people keep saying, oh, you're just rationalizing this thing. But the indigenous slavery system was quite different. People became members of households, and, there were clear lines of well, maybe responsibility or a sense of what the thing meant in its context. The question you raise is why the people didn't ask what they were going to do with us. Well, they weren't interested in what they were going to do with us. They just wanted to know that they were getting profit out of it. And what were they going to do with us? That question now is something that really gets to the heart of community. Who do you see as part of the community? Because you had ethnic loyalties, so that you don't necessarily, the concept of Africa is a modern invention, because Africans didn't see themselves as Africans. They saw themselves as various ethnic groups. It was much smaller scale definition of identity. So it's really a big question you have asked there, which I certainly can't answer in the way that it requires. But that question of humanity and how people become property and how you view yourself in relationship to other people with power, it's very complex, very complex.
Good evening, everybody.
Good, a young person on the mic, yes.
Well, I enjoyed this speech where we talked about far more than I thought I would. not that I thought it was going to be boring.
Thank you.
My lecturers ensured that I would enjoy this.
Yes.
Well, what I wanted to talk about is that, well, I know personally people who I speak with, my friends really, they don't identify themselves as African, and whenever I want to talk about it, they don't. They're saying that this is something that has passed. This is not something of the present anymore. And in my opinion, I feel that it's something that we should continue to keep in mind. But my question is, since slavery times, the morale of black people has gone down, I would say. Do you see it coming back? Do you see it returning? Do you find that what the world has become today has changed what we were and what we can be?
Tell me what you think.
Well, I mean, in the past we had the Black Power movement and little pockets in time where everybody is, well, I need an afro, I need an African outfit. But what does that really mean? Because it comes and it goes, and it never really stays.
All right, you raise a very profound question. Is African identity something that is a fashion?
Yeah.
Or is it something that we claim, I'm always interested in certain very profound questions. Big respects, my sister. At Emancipation Day and those things, you see people coming out in African clothes, I just feel sad, let's go and take off the clothes, because you know they're not wearing that any other time of the year, So it's like a costume that you put on for carnival kind of thing, And I really think that, yes, part of the problem is that we see Africa so negatively. That is why we don't want to identify with it. If we had this sense of Africa as a continent of power and stuff, we would want to identify. And I think the only way the images can change is as we affirm the value of our own history. We can't expect other people to tell us that Africa is a great continent, and as black people you have accomplished so much and so on. And, people still talk about going to Timbuktu as going to the bush. They have no concept of Timbuktu as an ancient university culture and so on. And it's our fault. We have to teach this history so that young people will want to